that's going to do it for Matt Piscatella's official report. I had something to kind of follow up on my own on Twitter, using this information that Matt provided and then coming up with my own analysis in here. And that's the following. And I'll just read it off for you as I wrote it, and then maybe explain if I think I might need to elaborate. After 100 months, PlayStation 4 has sold 117 million units worldwide. Typo. In 60 months, Nintendo Switch has sold 107.65 million. Nintendo Switch has been out for 60% of PS4's life, yet has sold 92% of its total thus far. That's important. The PS4 average per month over the last 100 months has been 1.17 million. The Nintendo Switch average per month over its last 60 months has been 1.79 million. If the Nintendo Switch were to continue this pace for another 40 months, then when it was 100 months old, it would be at 179.42 million units worldwide. However, this would happen as of June 30th, approximately 2025, as that's when it would be about 100 months old. But that's not the way how things work. The pace rises as a console is gaining steam, plateaus for a couple of years, and then slowly declines. So the monthly average will naturally go down eventually. We could see some spikes on Nintendo's side of things, however, and some of those are really unknown. They're determined on a few factors, and I'm going to break that up here. Will we see a price drop? If you see a significant price drop on a really healthy Nintendo Switch before it really goes down too far, you could actually halt that decline and have another spiked year if the price drop was significant. Will we get a player's choice line of reduced software? That not only helps software increase long run, which we're already looking at 1,035,000 being sold by March 31st next year, but reduced reduced software also helps would-be potential Nintendo Switch console owners be more inclined to buy the console, because now they're looking at it as not only is this system available for less because it's down to $70 or $100, but also I could get a fair amount of games for only $150 without having to spend hundreds of dollars for these highly recommended titles. Will there be a Nintendo Switch Plus before Nintendo Switch 2? What if NS Plus comes out officially adding more sales to NS, kind of like how Xbox One X and PlayStation 4 Pro and the new 3DS all add to their respective systems' lifetime sales. And then Nintendo Switch 2 comes out, and okay, that's its own thing. When Nintendo Switch 2 does come out, will there be cross-gen support for NS for a couple of years? You know, something that I think Nintendo needs to do a little bit better this time around is into Nintendo Switch 2's life for a couple of years, release high-end software that still can be played on Nintendo Switch, but experienced into much better, higher fidelity, performance, etc. on Nintendo Switch 2. So if you're buying Mario Kart 9 and it comes out, you could play that cartridge, you play that download on your Nintendo Switch, you could experience it a little bit better on Nintendo Switch Plus. But if you have a Nintendo Switch 2, there's a clear difference. That way you're taking advantage of this giant install base of 140 something million, 170 million, and you have a compelling reason for the hardcore that want to hop in early and experience the best, that have had the Nintendo Switch for the longest amount of time and are craving for that difference in visuals, a reason to expand. And also, you're not going to be able to pump out as many Nintendo Switch 2s at launch in that first year as you would like. So you're still going to sell software to the existing fan base and people in hopes of being able to play it on their next system, buying it for that reason too, etc. You see where I'm getting at? Nintendo really has to be careful, and they have a tremendous opportunity to do something that like no console has ever done before, and that's reach 200 million, and I'll get to that in a moment. Will Nintendo Switch 2 be backwards compatible? That actually, in my opinion, would help Nintendo sell more Nintendo Switches than not, because you could make the argument of, well, could people not buy a Nintendo Switch now because they realize that, well, a Nintendo Switch 2 is a few years out. I could wait till then to buy into this ecosystem to finally play Breath of the Wild or Super Mario Odyssey. Yeah, that is a potential. However, with a vibrant, successful market, more people than not would be willing to purchase a Nintendo Switch now, especially one that was price reduced and software that was price reduced, because they would say, okay, hold on, so I'm not just buying something that's going to be dead in a couple of years. This cartridge that I bought, I could also put it into my next system and then have some kind of better experience, a little bit improved this or that behind the scenes. Maybe sell my old system. Maybe I have a new kid, or maybe my old kid who was younger is now older, and that could be that individual system, or sell it, put that money towards a new system, but still keep my games. You know what I'm saying? I think Nintendo Switch 2 should be backwards compatible. Some people, yeah, might not buy a base Switch now because of that reason, but more than not would actually buy a Nintendo Switch knowing that this is a healthy ecosystem that I could get into. This Nintendo Switch Online or online expansion pass that I'm buying now will actually translate over into NS2. There you go. Here's an interesting fact for you. Sony price dropped the PlayStation 2 a couple of times, but by 2009 it was dropped to $100, 9 years after the system came out, and that was 3 years into the PlayStation 3's life. What if Nintendo Switch Plus comes out in, let's say, March of 2023, and Nintendo Switch 2, significantly more powerful, eventually with its own exclusive games that, okay, no longer can be played on Nintendo Switch, no longer Nintendo manufacturing, creating games for Nintendo Switch just for NS2, but in 2025, that's when that system comes out. But like I said, the OG Nintendo Switch model still getting some first-party support for a couple of years, 2027. Now you have a system in Nintendo Switch with 10 years of designated support by Nintendo for them. It got support from Nintendo, third parties, and indies for a decade, even into that Plus model's life, because they all still worked, and even into Nintendo Switch 2's life for a couple of years, in which then at that point Nintendo has, close to 40 million Nintendo Switch 2s out there. They're not necessarily going to be feeling like they're abandoning their user base or not having a good install base on the current platform enough to sell the next Pokemon, the next Mario, the next Smash Brothers, etc., because they'll have 40 million or so, and then you're moving on. And then who knows, maybe Nintendo Switch 2 has a very similar life, ideally, best case scenario, where they release a light model here, a plus model there, some kind of boosted version at this point, and then a third model, etc. Like, I really just think that Nintendo has an opportunity to create something brilliant here. Here's a little bit of a longer ways away thought. Imagine if we get to a point where Nintendo Switch 2 is a new system on the market for $400. That previously released Nintendo Switch Plus, whatever it cost at launch, is now $300, while the NS2 is out for $4. The OLED model is $200, or perhaps it would be lower than this, like $170 or something like that, to create a bigger gap. The OG, the original Nintendo Switch model, something like 120 at this point, 130 maybe. And the Lite for a measly $70. If you think that's too low, look at that PlayStation 2. 9 years later, it was reduced by 66.6% from $300 to $100. So who's to say that the Nintendo Switch Lite can't go from its $200 down to $70? That wouldn't even be as great of a percent drop, or the base Nintendo Switch even from 300 to 100. That's exactly that PlayStation 2 scenario. So these numbers that I'm picking aren't necessarily too far-fetched. You could maybe say, like I said, lower the OLED model a little bit, increase the OG a little bit, increase the light slightly, but this kind of pricing structure seems possible. Is it overwhelming potentially to some? Perhaps. Sometimes having so many SKUs, at this point you'd have NS2, NS Plus, OLED, the OG, and the Lite. 5 different things on the market. You could run into a case where someone's going into the store perhaps a little less informed, less hardcore than you and I watching / recording this, and like, I want the new Nintendo Switch. What is it? Well, we don't have the Nintendo Switch 2. You want the Plus or do you want the OLED model? It's a lot less because they're sold out of the 2. Yeah, okay, fine, I'll just get that. You have that. Is that a return? Is that just a buy and deal with? There could be a little bit of a confusion, but maybe not. Nintendo distinctly packages them, marks them differently, has a nice label of what does this one do or not. You don't want to overcomplicate it, like how sometimes video game companies have one game and there's like the regular version, the deluxe, the supreme, the digital, the physical, the ultra, and it's got this massive chart of complexity. You don't want that. And I'm not saying this would be that, but I think Nintendo could find a way how to make it still have a few systems out there and make them distinct and clear and affordable depending, while having a player's choice line, etc. It's potentially brilliant. Meanwhile, 1 to 2 first party and potentially third party Nintendo Switch games are permanently reduced to $20 or $30. This has been quite the generation for Nintendo because they haven't needed to reduce the price of the Nintendo Switch yet on a worldwide level or create a long-term, permanent, I should say, first party or third party partnership player's choice line. But they get to 20 or 30 bucks. I could see that really boosting Nintendo Switch sales themselves and of course the software. Assuming Nintendo keeps the production lines open and nails all of the above, this is why I've always said that the console can be a 210 million seller, and I still stand by that. But you gotta think, well, that the production line thing, right? Would Nintendo want to hold it open when they could be using those lines potentially for Nintendo Switch 2? Then again, it comes to a chip shortage possibility. What if they actually couldn't take advantage of all of the production lines and all of their contracts? So even if they could free up the space, they don't have the semiconductors and the parts available in mass quantities for Nintendo Switch 2, so they continue with the old Nintendo Switches. And also, the profit margins are going to be great on the old Nintendo Switch. They already are now better than they were 5 years ago. Even if you wanted to be much safer though, I truly believe that calling Nintendo Switch an eventual 160 million selling console is a pretty safe bet. Then I asked people on Twitter, how much do you think Nintendo Switch will sell at the end of its incredible run? Let's find out. So this poll is fairly new, but so far, with 66 votes, we've got 37.9% of the people saying 145 to 153 million, 42.4% of the people saying 154 to 162 million. So that first group thinks it'll just fall short of Nintendo DS or PlayStation 2. That second group think it'll barely beat one or possibly barely beat both. The third group, at 12.1%, says 163 to 179 million. That's a pretty big stretch. And then there are 7.6 people out there that are kind of in my mindset of it could do, I think it will do 180 to 210 million. Now maybe only a couple people think it would be 210. I gave it kind of a wide gap, right? This last gap is 30 million between 180 and 210. So maybe realistically some of the people are like, yeah, like 182, not 210, but that's the category because that's what Twitter gave a option for 4, And then I asked some people and stuff like that what they think, and we've got some comments in the comments section below, so that's going to be fun to go through later. But anyways, whew, that was a lot of fun. This is Video Game Sales with Paul Gale Network. Thank you for watching. The video became a little longer than normal because we went from Matt Pescatella's NPD breakdown for the month and also my own extended thoughts on where I think Nintendo is going to be with the Nintendo Switch a few years down the line, and some of my more advanced reasoning, trying to elaborate more on why do I keep saying this 210 thing everywhere on forums, on my videos, on my site, making this kind of wild claim for the last several years. Now you know. Some of you already knew before because you've been watching this, but I might actually even break this video into two parts, one fully released part and one part just on this last portion, because some people might, already have that NPD stuff down. They don't want to wait till the end to find out these 210 million selling thoughts, and they just kind of want to get to that part, and they might have missed it otherwise. So yeah, I might do that. All right, thanks for watching. Whether you stayed to the end, fast forwarded, watched the whole video, or both, or whatever, I appreciate it. Have a good one, and I'll see you all next time for more video game sales, news, talk, unboxing videos, etc. If you'd consider liking, subscribing, I'd appreciate it. Hit the notification bell if you want to get my videos on time, and your responses are always appreciated, and I look forward to conversating with you back and forth, whether it's on my site, YouTube, or Twitter. All right, take it easy. See y'all next time. Bye.